James Wright stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, the city skyline bathed in shades of amber and gold as the sun began its descent. At 53, he had built a formidable empire, a network of 32 car dealerships that sprawled across 3 states, an achievement born from his relentless work ethic and unwavering commitment to integrity. But as he watched the sunset, a heavy weight settled on his shoulders, far more burdensome than the success he had achieved. On his desk lay a stack of anonymous complaints, allegations against WRI's Premier Auto, the flagship dealership he had opened in downtown Chicago a quarter-century ago. The reports spoke of harassment, fraudulent repairs, and a toxic environment that contradicted everything James had worked to create. Frustration surged within him as he mulled over the name that stood out on every report: Ethan Rogers. He had hired Ethan, a man who exuded charisma and professionalism, believing he would revitalize the dealership. Instead, he had unwittingly welcomed a wolf into his henhouse. "Sarah," he bellowed, summoning his assistant. The door opened, and Sarah appeared, her brow furrowed with concern. "The investigator's final report just came in," she said, handing him the document as if it were a death warrant. James scanned the text, his heart sinking deeper. "Ethan was supposed to be the answer to our problems, not the source of them," he murmured. After a long silence, he met Sarah's gaze. "Cancel my meetings. I need a favor from Jerry in HR." In years of working together, Sarah had seen the glint in James's eyes enough times to sense when he was plotting something ambitious. She nodded, and within an hour, Jerry Morrison sat across from James, eyebrows knitted in confusion over the request. "You want to go undercover? Are you serious?" Jerry repeated incredulously. "Absolutely. I need to see for myself what's going on at WRI's Premier. I can't fire Ethan without understanding the full scope. Once people see you, the jig is up," Jerry cautioned. A sly smile crept onto James's face. "That's why I need a new identity. I want to be Jim Wallace, a 45-year-old mechanic from Michigan with a sad story of starting over after a divorce." Jerry shifted uneasily in his seat. "Sir, this is risky." James leaned forward, his expression hardening. "I'm not going to let our legacy crumble because of one rotten apple. If I want to save my dealership, I need to get my hands dirty." After an elaborate transformation that included growing out his beard, slipping into a padded suit to add an extra 40 pounds, and creating a believable backstory, James finally emerged as Jim Wallace. Stepping into the role would be the ultimate test, and he was determined to meet the challenge head-on. The following morning, James drove to the dealership in a beat-up Honda Civic, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The familiar building loomed ahead, but instead of approaching as the owner, he walked in through the service entrance, where he was met with uncertainty and cold stares rather than admiration. "Who are you?" one of the mechanics muttered, eyeing his ill-fitted coveralls. "Jim Wallace, just here to work," he replied, forcing himself to adopt the meek demeanor he had practiced. As he made his way to Ethan's office, James saw the young manager lounging in his seat, clearly unfazed by the arrival of a new employee. "You? A mechanic?" Ethan chuckled, his arrogance evident as he eyed James's bulk. "Is that what you call yourself? Looks like you should be on a mission to eat more than work." With each barb, James's resolve hardened. He was there to root out corruption, to expose Ethan's deceitful practices, and to protect the employees who had suffered under his bullying reign. He would gather evidence and ensure Ethan faced the reckoning he so desperately deserved. Little did Ethan know, the overweight mechanic he dismissed as lazy was on a powerful mission to restore justice. But beneath the layers of camaraderie lay a culture of fear that seemed impenetrable. James observed as Ethan berated the mechanics, dismissing their concerns as he pushed for more sales and higher profits. Each verbal jab felt like a stab to James's heart, igniting the fire within him. He remembered every name, every wince of discomfort on their faces as Ethan wielded his power. At lunch, James caught snippets of conversations from the other employees. Miguel, a young mechanic who seemed competent and eager, whispered to a colleague, "Ethan is ruthless. I have to keep my head down, or I could lose this job." That was it. Ethan's tactics were nothing short of oppressive. James observed and listened, storing every detail in his memory like a detective piecing together a complex case. This couldn't go on. He had to act before it was too late. Over the following weeks, James blended into the background as Jim Wallace, documenting the detrimental culture and gathering the compelling evidence he needed. He witnessed firsthand the clash of integrity against greed. Watching good people suffer under Ethan's tyranny reignited the passion that had first led James to open this dealership. James unearthed multiple unsettling truths, But what would he do with them? The answer loomed over him as he realized one undeniable fact. He needed to expose Ethan's corruption not through a dismissal, but through an undeniable reckoning that would restore the spirit of his flagship dealership. It was time to turn his observations into action, and set the gears of confrontation into motion. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue across the dealership once more, James knew that the fall of Ethan Rogers was just the beginning. The fight would be long, but he was ready, more determined than ever to reclaim the dignity of his employees and the legacy of what WRI's Premier Auto truly stood for. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dealership, James, still known by his disguise as Jim Wallace, felt a surge of determination coursing through him. He had spent weeks gathering evidence, with each day bringing him closer to the moment where he could confront Ethan Rogers and expose the web of corruption that infected WRI's Premier Auto. The time had come for action. There would be no more hiding in the shadows. The next morning, with a steel resolve, James walked into the garage. The usual clamor of mechanics at work sounded different today, resonating with a palpable tension. He felt the weight of their eyes as he headed to the break room for his morning coffee. They were all aware of the oppressive atmosphere that lingered around Ethan, and James knew they were silently rooting for him in this covert mission. Ethan was at his desk, the light from the window glinting off his slicked-back hair. The manager looked up, an arrogant smirk plastered across his face. "Ah, Wallace. I see you survived another day. Try not to trip over your own feet searching for spare parts." James forced a smile, hiding the indignation boiling beneath the surface. "Just here to work, sir. Whatever you need. Let's hope that you can figure out where everything is, because I'm not here to babysit you," Ethan snickered, dismissing him with a wave. His eyes glinted with a mix of disdain and arrogance, making it clear he viewed James as nothing more than an obstacle. That evening, once the mechanics had left for the day, James stayed late in the back office, poring over service logs, invoices, and documenting anomalies. Each record painted an unmistakable picture of negligence and fraud. He had found instances of customers being charged for unnecessary repairs, fraudulent work orders that had been flagged and ignored, and an unnerving pattern of kickbacks that would leave any observer slack-jawed in disbelief. Then, as he skimmed through the last batch of documents, he stumbled upon a name that made his heart race: Inspector Davidson. The same man who had been scrutinizing their operations had received hefty payments from Ethan. Suspicion blossomed in his gut like a wildflower. It seemed the corruption ran deeper than just one mismanaged dealership. It was systemic. James quickly took photos of the documents, ensuring he had undeniable proof. His heart pounded in his chest as he considered the implications of what he had uncovered. His meticulous record-keeping was more than just paperwork. It was a map leading directly to the heart of the rot inside WRI's Premier, and somewhere in that map lay Ethan's downfall. With the evidence hidden safely in his locker, James made a plan. Tomorrow, he would confront Ethan, but not before assembling a team of trusted allies, his co-workers who had suffered at Ethan's hands. Their voices needed to be heard, and together, they would stand strong against the impending tide of Ethan's wrath. The next day, James gathered a handful of mechanics and service advisors in a quiet corner of the garage before the start of the workday. The atmosphere was charged with apprehension, but determination shone in their eyes. "Look," James began, lowering his voice to draw them in. "I know that it's been hard, and we've all felt the pressure from Ethan. But this has gone too far. We can't let him continue to run this dealership into the ground. What do you want us to do?" Miguel chimed in, glancing nervously at his colleagues. "He'll fire us. If we don't take action, he'll ruin us anyway," James replied firmly. "I've gathered evidence of his fraud, the counterfeit parts, everything. But I can't do this without you." The group exchanged glances, hesitation evident on their faces, but it was Lisa who stepped forward. "We've been living in fear for too long. If we band together, we can take him down." One by one, they agreed, their spirits lifting with the power of unity. James felt the weight lift from his shoulders as he outlined his plan. They would document everything Ethan had done, corroborate each other's stories, and approach Amanda Chin from the legal department together. As the day progressed, the tension in the air thickened. James sensed something was amiss. Ethan seemed on edge, snapping at employees more frequently, his haughty disposition flawed by a nervous undercurrent. It was as if he could feel the storm brewing around him. During lunch, James and the group gathered at a table far from Ethan's line of sight, the atmosphere charged with anxiety. They hushed as Ethan entered the break room, his posture rigid. His eyes darted around as if searching for potential threats. Then, he caught sight of the group, and his smirk returned. Enjoying your little powwow? Ethan sneered, taking a bite of his sandwich. Planning your escape? James exchanged glances with the others, but Miguel spoke up, bravely challenging Ethan's taunt. We're just talking shop, Mr. Rogers. We're here to work. Oh, I do love a good joke, Ethan replied nonchalantly. But remember, if you want to keep your jobs, it'd be wise to steer clear of any shenanigans involving me. You wouldn't want to find yourselves on the receiving end of a pink slip. As Ethan continued his diatribe, a fire ignited in James's gut. Would he let this man continue to belittle them? No. They were on the brink of something far greater, and he would not let fear silence him any longer. That afternoon, the atmosphere in the dealership shifted drastically. Miguel, encouraged by their earlier conversation, had found the nerve to challenge an unethical practice while servicing a customer's vehicle. And to James's delight, the mechanics rallied behind him, echoing his concerns and supporting one another in demanding transparency. Each victory, no matter how small, tightened their bond and strengthened their resolve. But with every moment Ethan's reign began to unravel, James knew they were pushing him into a corner. In the following days, as they collected more evidence and prepared for their showdown with Amanda, James noticed a palpable change in Ethan. The arrogance that usually draped around him like a cloak had begun to fray, exposing insecurity beneath the surface. Finally, came the day they would present their findings. The mechanics gathered in the break room for one last huddle before confronting Amanda together. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Ready? James asked, locking eyes with each teammate. They nodded, their fear replaced with newfound courage. Then let's take back our dealership. As they walked towards Amanda's office, uncertainty loomed like dark clouds overhead, but James felt the thrill of justice propelling them forward. The confrontation with Ethan was inevitable, and with the truth in their hands, they were ready to unleash a reckoning that would shatter the very foundation of fear he had built. The moment was finally at hand: confrontation, accountability, and a chance to reclaim the integrity of WRI's premier auto. Little did they know, Ethan had already begun to plot his counterattack, a desperate move to protect his empire, setting the stage for an epic confrontation where secrets would clash against resolve. The stakes were high, and the winds of change were swirling. As James and his team approached Amanda Chin's office, the air grew thick with tension and anticipation. Each step echoed the unspoken resolve among them. They were marching into the eye of the storm, a conflict that would change the course of their dealership forever. Amanda was in her office reviewing documents when James knocked gently on the door. "Ms. Chin, could we have a word?" "Of course," she replied, looking up with an expression that quickly shifted to mild surprise at the group assembled behind James. "What's this about?" Once inside, the assembled team took seats around the table while James stood at the front, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes upon him. "We have serious concerns about Ethan Rogers," he said, his voice steady. "We believe he's been conducting unethical business practices, and we've gathered evidence to support our claims." Amanda arched an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but also cautious. "What kind of evidence?" James laid out the documents: service records, photographs of counterfeit parts, and accounts of employee harassment and wrongful practices. One by one, he presented them, sharing the stories and experiences each team member had encountered under Ethan's management. The air in the room crackled with tension as the gravity of the situation unfolded. This wasn't just a rebellion. It was a collective stand against the culture of fear that had gripped the dealership. As James continued, he could see Amanda's expression shift from skepticism to concern. "Why didn't you bring this to me sooner?" she asked, lowering her voice to ensure confidentiality. "This is serious." "We didn't have the courage until now," Lisa confessed, her voice trembling but her resolve firmer than ever. "We were afraid of losing our jobs or facing retaliation." Amanda nodded understandingly but added, "Your courage is commendable, but this could be detrimental to your positions. Ethan has influence, and he won't go down without a fight." James felt the rumble of adrenaline in his chest, pushing him to respond. "We're willing to stand together. We can't allow this to continue. It's not just about us. Think of the customers relying on us to uphold quality service." The room fell silent, the heaviness of the collective weight pressing upon them. Amanda rubbed her chin, assessing the evidence laid out before her until her expression hardened. "Okay, I'll take this to corporate immediately, but I need your full cooperation moving forward. If this escalates, you all need to be prepared." With their disclosures complete, they stood united, a steadfast wall against the expected retaliation from Ethan. As they filed out of the office, James felt a sense of momentum building. They had taken the first step toward reclaiming their integrity and rectifying the wrongs that had infected their workplace. Yet unbeknownst to them, Ethan was already aware of the brewing storm. As the team returned to the garage, they scarcely noticed that he had been lurking near the break room, overhearing snippets of their conversation with Amanda. A dark shadow crossed over his face as the realization hit him. He had relied on fear to keep the team in line, but now, a rebellion was brewing, stronger than he had ever anticipated. In a fit of rage, Ethan stormed into the service area, his voice booming across the garage. "I know you're all in cahoots. Don't think for a second that I won't find a way to fire every last one of you." The mechanics and advisors froze, their work forgotten as they turned their eyes to Ethan. James felt the tension in the air snap, but he didn't back down. He had prepared for this confrontation. "Ethan," he said, stepping forward confidently, "it's time for accountability. We know what you've been doing. The game is up." Ethan's face flared in anger, but quickly shifted to a cunning smile. "You think you can just walk in here and challenge me? I'll make sure your careers are over before they even start." "Not if we work together," Miguel interjected bravely, standing beside James. "And we're ready to defend what's right, together." "You don't know who you're dealing with," Ethan hissed. "I've built this place while you all stayed beneath me. You'll never find a job in this industry again. You'll be blacklisted." But his bluster did little to deter the resolve of James and the others. They had crossed a threshold into bravery, and they wouldn't retreat. As Ethan realized that his threats weren't producing their intended effect, his mask began to fracture. "That's it, Ethan. You're scared," James declared, feeling empowered by the unity of his teammates. "You've created a culture of fear, but we're standing up to it. Every action you've taken will be exposed." In that moment, their defiance seemed to invigorate the other mechanics. They moved closer, standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces resolute in solidarity. The tide of fear was turning. Ethan's facade crumbled as he pivoted on his heel, attempting to regain control. "You think Amanda is going to believe your lies over my years of service? I have connections, people who owe me favors." "Then let's see how far those connections take you when the truth comes out," Lisa shot back, her voice gaining strength. "You should know, we're not alone in this. The authorities will be interested in what we've uncovered." He turned back, his eyes wild. "You think you're so clever, don't you? I'll make sure you'll regret this." As James watched Ethan retreat into his office, he understood that they had ignited something that could not be extinguished. Fear had powered Ethan's reign, but as the sun dipped low in the sky, unity and courage shone brighter. They stood on the threshold of chaos. The time had come to confront not just Ethan but the very systems that allowed his corruption to flourish. With Amanda leading the charge to corporate, they had taken the first crucial step, but Ethan wouldn't go down quietly. He would swing back, claws bared and ready to fight, and James knew the storm was about to break. As the day turned to dusk, James gathered the team once more, rallying them in front of a makeshift board covered in their evidence. "This isn't over," he urged, feeling the surge of determination among them. "We're just getting started. We need to prepare for what's coming." His words galvanized the group, drawing them in for strategy sessions and brainstorming ways to fortify their resolve. They couldn't underestimate Ethan, and every moment until the showdown with corporate had to be spent preparing for the confrontation that loomed ahead. Finally, they resolved to do something unprecedented: collect testimonials from customers who had been exploited under Ethan's management. They would show not only a pattern, but the human impact of the disreputable practices. Each mechanic would reach out to previous customers, recounting their own experiences while shining a light on the deceitful tactics employed by Ethan Rogers. As the night wore on and shadows danced along the walls of the dealership, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were fighting not just for their jobs, but to restore the ethical foundation of their dealership, a place they had all called home. He looked around at his teammates, resolute faces illuminated by the overhead lights. There was no going back. They were committed to the fight, and James was ready for the reckoning that awaited on the horizon. The storm was coming, and together, they would face it head-on. As dawn broke over WRI's Premier Auto, the first rays of sunlight spilled through the garage windows, casting a hopeful glow on James and his team. They had spent the night strategizing, gathering testimonials, and fortifying their resolve. Today was not merely another day at work. It was the day they would stand together against the tide of corruption that had festered for far too long. James glanced around at his comrades, who had become more than just colleagues. They were his allies, ready to expose the truth for the sake of their integrity and the dealership's reputation. The weight of their fight was not lost on him. This wasn't just about taking down Ethan, it was about restoring a sense of pride in their work and their workplace. The meeting with Amanda was scheduled for late morning, and James could feel the electric tension crackling in the air as they settled into their roles for the day. They were all determined to stay focused, moving through the garage with a newfound sense of purpose as they each recalled customer testimonies and chronicled the unethical practices witnessed over the years. The hours crawled by, but in the back of his mind, James prepared for the impending storm. What would Ethan do when he realized the full extent of their efforts? Would he lash out, trying to undermine them further? There was no telling how far he would go to protect his empire. At precisely 10 o'clock, Amanda summoned them to her office. James took a deep breath, exchanging nervous glances with his fellow mechanics before stepping into the room. They had prepared meticulously for this moment, and now it was time to present their case. After a few moments of pleasantries, James cleared his throat, his heart racing as he said, "Thank you for meeting with us, Ms. Chin. We're ready to present the evidence we gathered regarding Ethan's practices." James stepped forward and began laying out their findings, a collection of testimonials and documentation that detailed the rampant misconduct. Each piece of paper was infused with the voices of customers who had trusted WRI's Premier Auto with their cars, only to be taken advantage of. As he shared the stories of those misled, he could see Amanda's brow furrow and her resolve strengthen. The atmosphere in the office shifted as James's voice resonated with palpable anger and frustration, resonating with everyone who had suffered under Ethan's management. Their team, so united in purpose, began to share their own experiences. Lisa recounted how they had been pressured to complete unnecessary repairs on customer vehicles, while Miguel explained how faulty parts had been used without their knowledge. "We have witnesses," James concluded firmly. "We're ready to go to corporate with everything we can gather. How far does this extend, Ms. Chin? We want to fight this, not just for us but for the integrity of this dealership." As Amanda reviewed the material, her expression hardened. "This is incredibly serious, and if what you're saying holds water, it could significantly impact WRI as a whole. But you need to understand that Ethan is a powerful figure in this company. He will not take this lightly. Are you ready for the fallout?" "Yes," the team spoke as one, their voices steady and unwavering. "We're ready." Moments later, a hesitant knock echoed through the room. Before anyone could respond, Ethan strode in, his demeanor exuding arrogance as he caught sight of the assembled group. "What's going on here?" he barked, his eyes narrowing on Amanda. Amanda sat back in her chair, her expression composed. "Ethan, we're discussing some serious allegations concerning your management style and practices here at Premier Auto." Ethan's eyes flared with contempt. "What allegations? Whatever they've told you is a load of rubbish. These mechanics are nothing without me. They're all trying to save their jobs by pointing fingers." James felt the rage bubbling beneath the surface. "That's not true, Ethan. We're doing this because you've exploited customers and belittled every one of us. You've created a toxic environment, and we are done being scared." Ethan scoffed, looking back at Amanda with a mocking smile. "You really think you can believe them over me? I have years of service and experience that speak for themselves. They are just disgruntled employees trying to cover their own incompetence." But Amanda remained stoic, her eyes piercing into Ethan as she laid the evidence before him. She wasn't swayed. "The evidence is clear, Ethan. I will be initiating an investigation into your practices, and I expect full cooperation moving forward." Ethan's bravado faltered, shifting into anger. "You think you can just throw me out? I built this dealership. I have connections higher up than you." "Connections built on deceit and exploitation," James shot back, feeling emboldened by the trust lent to him by his colleagues. The room was charged with energy as awareness dawned on Ethan's face. This time, he may not come out unscathed. "You'll all regret this," Ethan hissed, trying to regain his composure. "I'll make sure it comes back to haunt you." As Ethan stormed out, Amanda turned back to James and his team, finally addressing the unyielding group with respect. "Congratulations. You've taken the first brave step. This may get volatile, but I assure you, you're not alone in this. We will gather all necessary resources to hold him accountable." The team exchanged relieved glances, the weight that had been pressing upon them beginning to lift. For the first time in a long time, they felt the warmth of hope blossoming within them. Days turned into weeks as the investigation unfolded, revealing layers upon layers of Ethan's misdeeds. As word spread through the company, the other dealerships began to add their voices to the chorus of claims against his unethical practices. Customers felt they were heard, mechanics felt empowered, and Amanda was staunch in her support. In the end, Ethan Rogers was suspended pending further investigation, and the dealership flourished without his oppressive presence. James and his team advocated for changes that would prevent such corruption from ever taking root again. They established a more transparent policy, emphasizing community engagement and customer trust, slowly restoring pride in the workplace. As the sun set on the various ups and downs of their journey, James could not help but feel proud. They had transformed fear into courage, division into unity. Standing amidst his friends, the walls of the garage felt alive again. The sound of laughter and camaraderie replaced the grip of silence that had once suffocated them. James smiled at his colleagues, realizing then that their battle had given birth to something more significant, a community bound by trust and integrity. They had not just fought for their livings but had reclaimed something more precious, their dignity. Together, they had taken the fight against corruption and won. Now, as they looked toward the horizon, lit up with the soft glow of dusk, they knew that this was only the beginning of their commitment to ethics, teamwork, and excellence. With determination and hope ignited, they stepped into the future, one forged in courage and united in purpose. The storm had passed, and with it, the promise of new beginnings awaited.